In a more practical way, fire has been known to early man for about 400,000 years, we think. It's certainly found in the caves of Peking man. Every culture since then has used fire and used it to make the simple transformations of everyday life, to cook, to dry and harden wood, to heat and split stones. But of course, the great transformation that helped to make civilization goes deeper. Physics is the knife that cuts into the grain of nature. Fire, the flaming sword, is the knife that cuts below the visible structure into the stone. That is the extraction of metals from their ores, which we now know was begun 7,500 years ago, about the year 5,500 BC, in Persia and Afghanistan. At that time, men put the green stone malachite into the fire in earnest, and from it flowed the red metal, copper. They recognized copper because it's sometimes found in raw lumps on the surface, and in that form it had been hammered and worked for over 2,000 years already. The New World, too, worked copper and smelted it by the birth of Christ, but it stopped there. Only the Old World went on to make metal the backbone of civilized life. Suddenly, the range of man's control is increased immensely. He has at his command a material which can be molded, drawn, hammered, cast, which can be made into a tool, an ornament, a vessel, and which can be thrown back into the fire and reshaped. It has only one shortcoming. Copper is a soft metal. As soon as it's put under strain, a copper wire, for instance, it visibly begins to yield. That's because copper, like every metal, is made up of layers of crystal. And it's the crystal layers which slide over one another until finally they part. When the copper wire necks, it's not so much that it fails in tension as that it fails by internal slipping. Of course, the coppersmith did not think like that. He was faced with a robust problem, which is that copper will not take an edge. For a short time, the ascent of man stood poised at the next step to make a hard metal with a cutting edge. That seems a large claim for a technical advance. That's because, as a discovery, the next step is so paradoxical and beautiful. When to copper you add an even softer metal, tin, you make an alloy which is harder than either. You make bronze. The point is that almost any pure material is weak. What tin does is to add to the pure material a kind of atomic grit, points of a different roughness, which stick in the crystal lattice and stop it from sliding. That discovery reached its finest expression in China. It had come to China almost certainly from the Middle East, where bronze was discovered about 3,800 BC. The high period of bronze in China is also the beginning of Chinese civilization as we think of it, the Shang dynasty before 1500 BC. The Shang dynasty is a time when ceramics are also developed and writing becomes fixed. It's the calligraphy, both on the ceramics and the bronze, which is so startling. The Chinese made the mold out of strips, shaped round a ceramic core. And because the strips are still found, we know how the process worked. The proportions of copper and tin that the Chinese used are fairly exact. Bronze can be made from almost any proportion, between, say, 5% and 20% of tin. But the best Shang bronzes are held at 15% of tin, and there the sharpness of the casting is perfect. At that proportion, bronze is almost 3 times as hard as copper. This is a ritual vessel in which drink is offered to the gods. The Shang bronzes are ceremonial, divine objects. They express for China a monumental worship, which in Europe at that same moment was building Stonehenge. Bronze becomes, from this time onwards, a material for all purposes, the plastic of its age. The delight of these Chinese works, vessels for wine and food, in part playful, in part divine, is that they form an art that grows spontaneously out of its own technical skill. The scientific content of these classical techniques is clear-cut. With the discovery that fire will smelt metals, comes in time the discovery that it will fuse them together to make an alloy with new properties.